Stop scrolling. What I'm about to reveal will fundamentally change how you navigate every interaction, every opportunity, and every challenge you face. There's one trait that separates those who command rooms from those who fade into backgrounds. One characteristic that Niccolò Machiavelli identified over 500 years ago that still gives certain people an almost unfair advantage in business, relationships, and life. And here's what's fascinating. Most people think they have this trait. They believe they possess it. But the brutal truth is, they're operating with a counterfeit version that's actually making them weaker, not stronger. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what this hidden trait is, why most people get it completely wrong, and most importantly, how to develop the authentic version that creates real power and influence in your life. I want you to think about someone you know who just seems to win consistently. They get promoted faster. People naturally follow them. Opportunities seem to find them. They navigate complex situations with ease while others struggle with simple decisions. What do they have that you don't? Better luck. Richer parents. Superior intelligence. No. They have this one trait, and they've mastered it in a way most people never will. The hidden trait revealed. So what is this trait that Machiavelli understood so deeply? It's calculated decisiveness. Now, before you click away thinking you already know what decisiveness means, let me stop you right there. What I'm talking about isn't the impulsive decision-making that destroys careers. It's not reckless action. And it's definitely not the fake confidence that collapses under pressure. Calculated decisiveness is the ability to make clear, committed decisions rapidly while simultaneously accounting for consequences, positioning, and strategic advantage. It's the fusion of speed and strategy, action and awareness, boldness and calculation. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." This is it. This is the entire framework. The fox represents calculation, the ability to see what's really happening, to recognize traps and opportunities. The lion represents decisiveness, the courage to act, to commit, to execute without hesitation. Most people are neither fox nor lion. They're sheep, following whatever everyone else is doing, never calculating, never deciding, just reacting. Some people develop fox-like qualities but lack the lion's courage. They analyze everything, see all the angles, but freeze when it's time to act. They know what should be done but never do it. Others have lion-like boldness but lack the fox's wisdom. They act quickly and confidently but without calculation. They mistake recklessness for decisiveness and wonder why their bold moves keep backfiring. The unfair advantage comes from combining both. Being the fox who sees clearly and the lion who acts boldly. That's calculated decisiveness. That's what Machiavelli understood. That's what gives certain people power that seems almost supernatural to everyone else. Drop fox and lion in the comments if you're ready to master this trait. Why most people get this completely wrong. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Our society has created 3 massive misconceptions about decisiveness that actually prevent people from developing this trait. Misconception number 1. Decisiveness means acting fast. People think being decisive simply means making quick decisions. So they start making rapid choices without gathering information, without considering consequences, without strategic thinking. Then they wonder why their quick decisions lead to terrible outcomes. I've watched this play out countless times. Someone decides they need to be more decisive, so they start saying yes or no to everything immediately. They make snap judgments. They commit to things without thinking them through. They confuse speed with strength. But here's what they don't understand. Machiavelli's decisiveness wasn't about speed. It was about commitment. It was about making a clear choice and following through completely, regardless of how long the decision took to make. The person who takes 2 days to carefully evaluate an opportunity but then commits 100% once they decide is far more decisive than someone who says yes in 2 seconds but then wavers, second-guesses, and fails to execute. Real decisiveness isn't about how fast you choose. It's about how completely you commit once you've chosen. Misconception number 2. Decisiveness means never changing your mind. This one destroys more careers than almost anything else. People believe that once they make a decision, changing course means they weren't decisive. So they double down on failing strategies. They throw good money after bad. They stay committed to obviously wrong choices because they think flexibility is weakness. Machiavelli understood something crucial. A prudent man should always follow in the path trodden by great men and imitate those who are most excellent. What does this mean? It means you study what works. You observe results. And when reality tells you something isn't working, you adapt. That's not indecisiveness. That's strategic intelligence. The truly decisive person commits fully to a course of action while simultaneously monitoring results and remaining ready to pivot when evidence demands it. They're not attached to being right. They're committed to getting results. I've seen executives destroy companies because they were too proud to admit a strategy wasn't working. They confused stubbornness with decisiveness. Meanwhile, the most successful leaders I know can turn on a dime when data suggests a new approach, and their teams respect them more, not less, for this flexibility. The key is this: you commit completely to your current strategy until evidence shows you should shift. Then you shift completely to the new strategy. What you never do is hedge, waffle, or try to do both simultaneously. Misconception number 3. Decisiveness is about you. This is the deadliest misconception. People think decisiveness is about demonstrating their own strength, proving they're in charge, showing they're not weak. So they make decisions that serve their ego rather than their objectives. They say no to good ideas because accepting them might make them look like they're not in control. They refuse to ask for input because they think leaders should have all the answers. They make unilateral decisions when collaboration would produce better outcomes. But Machiavelli understood something profound. Real power isn't about looking powerful. It's about achieving objectives. Your decisions should serve your goals, not your ego. The person with calculated decisiveness asks, what decision best positions me to achieve my objective? Not, what decision makes me look most decisive? Sometimes the most strategically powerful move is asking for more information. Sometimes it's delegating the decision to someone with better expertise. Sometimes it's taking longer to decide because the stakes are enormous. The fox calculates what will work. The lion commits to doing it. Neither cares about performing decisiveness for an audience. The 4 elements of calculated decisiveness. Now that you understand what calculated decisiveness really is and what it isn't, let me break down the 4 essential elements you need to develop this trait. These are the specific components that, when combined, give you that unfair advantage. Element 1. Information hierarchy. The fox must know what to look for. Most people drown in information while starving for wisdom. They collect data indiscriminately, treating every input as equally valuable, then feel overwhelmed and unable to decide. Machiavelli was a master of information hierarchy. He understood that certain information matters enormously while most information is noise. Your ability to rapidly identify which is which determines how quickly and accurately you can decide. Here's the framework. Every decision has 2 to 3 critical variables that will determine success or failure. Your job is to identify those variables immediately and focus exclusively on gathering information about them. Let me give you an example. You're considering a business partnership. Most people will gather information about everything: the person's background, their office space, their previous ventures, their personality, what others say about them, their financial statements, their marketing strategy, their technology, their team. They'll spend weeks collecting all this information and still feel uncertain. Why? Because they're treating all information as equally important. The person with calculated decisiveness identifies the 2 to 3 critical variables immediately. For a partnership, these might be: does this person deliver on commitments? Do our incentives align? Do they have a skill set that complements mine? Everything else is secondary. You gather information on these three questions rapidly and intensely. You create tests or scenarios that reveal the truth about these specific variables. And once you have clarity on these critical factors, you decide. This is what the fox does. It doesn't try to know everything. It knows exactly what matters and focuses entirely on that. In your life right now, most of your decisions are probably delayed because you're gathering information about things that don't actually matter. You're researching features that won't impact your outcome. You're seeking opinions from people who lack relevant experience. You're waiting for certainty about variables that are fundamentally uncertain. The person with information hierarchy skills identifies the critical factors, gathers targeted information about those factors, and accepts that everything else involves manageable uncertainty. This is how you make decisions quickly without being reckless. You're not deciding with less information. You're deciding with the right information. Practice this immediately. The next time you face a decision, ask yourself, what are the 2 to 3 factors that will actually determine whether this works or fails? Then gather information exclusively about those factors. Watch how much faster and better your decisions become. Drop this affirmation: I focus on what matters and ignore the noise. Element 2. Consequence mapping. The fox must see the traps. Most people make decisions by asking, will this work? But that's the wrong question. The right question is, if this works, what happens next? And if it fails, what happens next? Machiavelli was obsessed with second and third order consequences. He didn't just think about whether a prince should be feared or loved. He thought about what happens after you're feared, who becomes your enemy, how that changes your options, what resources you'll need to maintain that position. Consequence mapping is the ability to project forward from any decision and see the chain of events it sets in motion, both if it succeeds and if it fails. Here's how you develop this skill. For any significant decision, force yourself to map out 3 scenarios. Best case scenario: this works perfectly. What happens next? What new opportunities does this create? What new challenges? Who benefits? Who loses? What resources will I need to capitalize on this success? What threats might emerge from competitors or others affected by my success? Expected case scenario: this works reasonably well but not perfectly. What complications arise? What adjustments will I need to make? What resources get consumed? What does my position look like after this plays out? Worst case scenario: this fails. What are the consequences? Can I recover? What resources do I lose? What relationships are damaged? What reputation impact occurs? What does my fallback position look like? The key insight: you're not trying to predict the future perfectly. You're trying to understand whether you can manage the likely consequences in each scenario. Many decisions that look risky become obviously worth taking when you realize the worst case is manageable and the expected case is favorable. Other decisions that look safe become obviously bad when you realize even the best case doesn't move you toward your objectives. I've watched people take enormous risks without consequence mapping, then face outcomes they never anticipated and have no plan to handle. They thought they were being decisive. They were actually being reckless. I've also watched people avoid opportunities that would have transformed their lives because they never mapped the consequences accurately. They convinced themselves the risk was higher than it actually was because they didn't think through what would really happen if things went wrong. The person with calculated decisiveness maps consequences before committing. The fox sees the traps and the opportunities clearly before the lion charges forward. Smash that like if your mind just clicked. Element 3. Commitment intensity. Now we move from the fox to the lion. You've identified the critical information. You've mapped the consequences. Now you must commit with an intensity that most people cannot comprehend. This is where most people fail. They make a decision intellectually, but not emotionally. They say yes but hold back their full effort. They commit verbally, but not behaviorally. They start something but keep one foot out the door just in case. Machiavelli wrote, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." He understood that the intensity of your commitment often matters more than the wisdom of your decision. A mediocre strategy executed with total commitment will outperform a brilliant strategy executed half-heartedly. The person who fully commits to the wrong path and then adjusts will go further than the person who never fully commits to anything. Here's what commitment intensity looks like in practice. When you decide to pursue an opportunity, you don't dabble. You don't try it out. You don't see how it goes. You commit resources, time, energy, and reputation. You burn ships. You create conditions where backing out becomes more costly than pushing through. When you decide to end something, you don't fade out gradually. You don't keep one foot in. You don't leave the door open just in case. You close that chapter completely and redirect all resources to your new direction. This intensity terrifies most people. They want to keep their options open. They want to hedge their bets. They want to commit just enough to make progress but not enough to be locked in. But here's what they don't understand. This hedging is precisely what ensures they'll never achieve exceptional results. The opportunities that change lives require full commitment. The people who can help you require seeing your total dedication. The skills you need to develop require immersive focus. When you commit with intensity, several things happen. First, other people notice and respond differently. They take you seriously. They offer help. They refer opportunities to you. They see you as someone who delivers rather than someone who dabbles. Second, you eliminate the mental drain of constantly reconsidering your choice. You free up cognitive resources to focus on execution rather than evaluation. Third, you discover capabilities you didn't know you had. Full commitment creates pressure that forces growth. You develop skills faster because you have no choice. The lion doesn't attack hesitantly. It commits completely to the hunt. That's the intensity you need once you've decided. Element 4. Adjustment velocity. The final element combines fox and lion. The speed at which you recognize when adjustment is needed and the decisiveness with which you implement that adjustment. Most people fall into two traps. Either they commit so rigidly that they ignore feedback and stay committed to failing strategies, or they're so quick to change that they never give anything enough time to work. Calculated decisiveness requires that you establish clear decision triggers in advance. You commit fully to a path, but you also define specific conditions that would signal a need to pivot. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He advised leaders to be both resolute and flexible, to hold positions firmly while remaining alert to changing circumstances. The key is having objective criteria for when to hold and when to fold. Here's the framework. When you commit to any strategy, simultaneously define your success metrics, your timeline, and your pivot triggers. Success metrics. What specific results indicate this is working? Be concrete. Not, things should improve, but, we should see X by Y date. Timeline. How long will you give this approach before evaluating? Be realistic. Some strategies need months or years to show results. Others should show progress within days or weeks. Pivot triggers. What specific evidence would indicate you need to change course? What results would mean this approach isn't viable? Once you establish these parameters, you commit fully until you hit a pivot trigger or achieve your success metrics. You don't reconsider daily based on feelings or minor setbacks. You execute intensely and monitor objectively. When you hit a pivot trigger, you adjust with the same decisiveness you committed originally. You don't gradually shift. You don't half commit to the new direction while maintaining the old. You pivot completely. This is adjustment velocity. The speed at which you can move from full commitment to plan A to full commitment to plan B when objective evidence demands it. I've watched entrepreneurs waste years on businesses that weren't working because they never established clear pivot triggers. They just kept trying harder, hoping things would improve, unable to admit the strategy needed fundamental change. I've also watched people abandon promising ventures too quickly because they never defined realistic timelines. They expected immediate results, interpreted normal early struggles as failure signals, and pivoted before their strategy had time to work. The person with calculated decisiveness avoids both traps. They commit completely but evaluate objectively. They hold firm until evidence demands change, then change immediately and completely. How to develop this trait starting today. Now you understand the trait and its 4 elements. The question is, how do you actually develop calculated decisiveness in your own life? Let me give you a practical, step-by-step approach you can start implementing immediately. Practice Arena 1. Small stakes decisions. Start by practicing on decisions that don't carry massive consequences. This is where most people waste enormous time and energy while developing terrible decision-making habits. For the next week, make a commitment. Every decision that would take less than 10 minutes to reverse will be made within 60 seconds. This includes what to eat, what to wear, which route to take, which task to do first, whether to attend an event. Here's the process. Identify the critical variable, make your decision based on that variable alone, and commit completely without reconsidering. For example, choosing lunch. Critical variable. What will give me sustained energy for my afternoon work? Decision made in 30 seconds. Order placed. No menu browsing, no second guessing, no wondering if you should have chosen something else. This might seem trivial, but it's not. These small decisions are training grounds. Every time you waffle over something insignificant, you're reinforcing indecisive patterns. Every time you decide quickly and commit fully to even trivial choices, you're building the neural pathways of calculated decisiveness. Most successful people I know don't spend mental energy on low-stakes decisions. They have systems, defaults, and quick decision processes that preserve their cognitive resources for high-stakes choices. Practice this for 2 weeks. Watch what happens. You'll notice you have more mental energy. You'll feel more confident. And you'll be developing the habit of decisiveness in a low-risk environment. Share this with someone who overthinks everything. Practice Arena 2. Consequence mapping everything. For every significant decision you face in the next month, force yourself to write out the 3 consequence scenarios I described earlier. Best case, expected case, worst case. Don't do this mentally. Write it down. The act of writing forces clarity. It reveals fuzzy thinking. It shows you where you're making assumptions versus seeing clearly. After you write out the scenarios, ask yourself these questions. Can I manage the worst-case outcome? If this fails completely, can I recover? Be honest. If you can't manage the worst case, either don't make this decision or restructure it so you can. Does the expected case move me meaningfully toward my goals? This is crucial. Many decisions people make have neutral expected outcomes. Even if things go reasonably well, they don't actually advance position. Why take the risk? Does the best case create meaningful new opportunities? If everything works perfectly, does this open doors to even bigger possibilities, or is this a dead end? When you map consequences this way, decision-making becomes clearer. Some opportunities that looked attractive reveal themselves as high risk with limited upside. Other opportunities that seemed risky reveal themselves as manageable risk with enormous upside. Keep a decision journal. Write down your consequence maps before you decide, then review them after you see results. This feedback loop accelerates your development of consequence mapping skills dramatically. You'll start noticing patterns. You'll get better at predicting how things will play out. You'll develop intuition about which types of risks are worth taking and which aren't. Subscribe if you want more strategies like this. Practice Arena 3. Commitment experiments. Here's where you practice commitment intensity. Choose 3 areas where you've been dabbling, hedging, or keeping one foot out the door. These might be a business idea you've been testing half-heartedly. A skill you've been trying to develop without real focus. A relationship where you haven't fully shown up. A health goal you've been approaching casually. Choose one. For the next 30 days, commit to it with an intensity you've never brought before. Establish what full commitment looks like. Specific actions, daily practices, resource allocation, time investment. Then do it. Completely. Without hedging. without keeping other options warm, without the safety net of, I'm just trying this out. Create accountability. Tell people about your commitment. Put money on the line. Create consequences for breaking it. Make backing out costly. The goal isn't necessarily to continue this commitment forever. The goal is to experience what full commitment feels like and to see what results that level of intensity produces. Most people have never actually experienced committing fully to anything. They've always held something back. They've always hedged. They've never seen what they're truly capable of when they go all in. Comment, all in, if you're done hedging. This experiment will show you. You'll either discover this commitment is worth continuing, or you'll rule it out definitively and move on without wondering, what if? Either way, you've practiced commitment intensity. Drop what you're committing to for 30 days in the comments. Practice Arena 4, rapid pivoting. Finally, practice adjustment velocity. For every commitment you make, establish your pivot triggers in advance. Let's say you commit to a new marketing strategy for your business. Define, if we don't see a 15% increase in qualified leads within 60 days, we pivot to strategy B. Write it down. Put it in your calendar. When day 60 arrives, evaluate objectively. Did you hit the metric? If yes, continue and optimize. If no, pivot immediately and completely to your alternative strategy. Don't adjust the timeline. Don't revise the metric. Don't make excuses. The point of establishing triggers is to create objective decision points that override your emotional attachments and biases. This practice accomplishes two things. First, it trains you to pivot decisively when evidence demands it. You don't slowly fade from one approach to another. You switch completely. Second, it prevents you from staying committed to failing strategies. Your pivot triggers are safety mechanisms. They ensure you're responsive to reality even when your ego wants to keep trying. Practice this cycle repeatedly. Commit with intensity to clear metrics and timelines, execute fully until your evaluation point, then continue or pivot completely based on objective results. After several cycles, you'll develop the complete trait of calculated decisiveness. You'll combine fox-like calculation with lion-like commitment. You'll move faster than people who act recklessly and achieve better results than people who analyze endlessly. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Why this gives you an unfair advantage. Now let me explain exactly why calculated decisiveness creates such a profound advantage in almost every area of life. Advantage 1. You capture opportunities others miss. Most opportunities have narrow windows. By the time the average person finishes analyzing, gathering more information, and getting comfortable with a decision, the opportunity has closed. The person with calculated decisiveness identifies critical factors quickly, maps consequences rapidly, and commits while others are still deliberating. They're not being reckless. They're being strategic about what information matters and decisive about acting on it. Over a lifetime, this means they capture 10x more opportunities simply because they can decide while windows are still open. Advantage 2. People want to work with you. Here's something most people don't realize. Decisiveness is magnetic. People are drawn to those who can make clear decisions and commit to them. In business, partners, investors, and customers want to work with people who can decide and execute. Indecisive people create uncertainty, delays, and frustration. In relationships, people are attracted to those who know what they want and pursue it directly. Uncertainty and wavering create anxiety and distance. The person with calculated decisiveness attracts better opportunities, better relationships, and better collaborators simply because they're easier and more rewarding to work with. Advantage 3. You learn faster. This might be the most important advantage. Every decision you make and execute produces learning. When you commit fully, you get clear feedback about what works and what doesn't. The person who dabbles learns slowly because their results are ambiguous. They can always claim they didn't fail, they just didn't commit enough. So they never learn what actually works. The person who commits fully learns rapidly. When something works, they know exactly what to repeat and scale. When something fails, they get clear feedback about what to avoid or adjust. Over time, this learning velocity compounds dramatically. The decisive person accumulates wisdom about what works far faster than the indecisive person, creating an ever-widening gap in capability and results. Like this video if you're serious about getting ahead. Advantage 4. You build momentum. Success builds on success, but only if you commit long enough to achieve it. Most people never build momentum because they switch directions before their efforts compound. Calculated decisiveness creates momentum because you commit with intensity to clear objectives for defined timelines. You give your efforts time to compound before evaluating and potentially pivoting. This creates a snowball effect. Each committed effort produces results, learning, and capabilities that make your next committed effort more likely to succeed. Meanwhile, the person who constantly reconsiders, hedges, and maintains too many options never builds momentum in any direction. They're always starting from zero. Check the description for the next video you need to watch. The challenge. So here's where we stand. You now understand the one trait that gives certain people an almost unfair advantage in life. You know it's not luck, genetics, or circumstances. It's calculated decisiveness, the ability to be both fox and lion, to combine calculation with commitment, to move quickly without being reckless. You know the 4 elements: information hierarchy, consequence mapping, commitment intensity, and adjustment velocity. You have practical exercises to develop each element starting immediately. Now comes the real question: what are you going to do with this knowledge? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people who watch this video will nod along, think, "That's interesting," and then continue making decisions exactly the way they always have. They'll keep overanalyzing low-stakes choices. They'll keep gathering information indiscriminately instead of focusing on critical factors. They'll keep hedging their commitments and wondering why nothing changes. The rare few will do something different. They'll pick one practice arena and start today. They'll make their small decisions in 60 seconds. They'll write out consequence maps for their next significant choice. They'll choose one commitment and go all in for 30 days. They'll establish clear pivot triggers for their current strategies. These people will develop the trait. They'll start experiencing the advantages. And 6 months from now, they'll look back at this moment as the turning point. Which group are you in? Machiavelli wrote. It must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle, than to initiate a new order of things. Developing calculated decisiveness is exactly this: initiating a new order in how you make choices and take action. It's difficult. Success isn't guaranteed. And it requires you to change patterns you've reinforced for years. But the alternative is continuing on your current path. Making decisions the way you always have. Getting results you've always gotten. Watching others capture opportunities, build momentum, and create success that seems mysteriously unattainable to you. The choice is yours. But here's what I know: if you develop this trait, if you become someone who combines the fox's calculation with the lion's commitment, you will have an advantage so profound that others will call it luck, timing, or natural talent. But you'll know the truth. It's calculated decisiveness. It's the one trait Machiavelli understood 500 years ago that still creates extraordinary results today. Now drop this final affirmation in the comments: I am both fox and lion. I calculate clearly and commit completely. Subscribe now, hit the like button, and comment below with one decision you're making differently this week. Do it before you click away. The question isn't whether calculated decisiveness works. The question is whether you'll develop it. Start today. Choose one practice arena. Make one decision differently than you usually would. Commit to one thing with intensity you haven't brought before. The advantage is available to anyone willing to develop it. Most people won't. But you're still here, which means you might be different. Prove it. Not to me. To yourself. Be the fox who sees clearly. Be the lion who acts boldly. Be the person who combines both and creates results that seem impossible to everyone else. Your move.